Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today, we are thinking about autism spectrum disorder. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is the topic in the rave right now. We hear it all the time between parents, between the media, through news. I mean, it's everywhere. So, why not think about it, right? So, I have a special guest here, Michael, who's going to really help us think about this in a whole new light. So, with that being said, thank you so much, Michael, for coming on to my show, sharing your time, your perspective with me. I'm really excited about this. But let's go ahead and just dive right in. When you hear the words autism spectrum, what does that make you think about?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. What comes to my mind is basically obviously my son. He was diagnosed a couple of years ago, but in reality, it's something that at first I thought, our world was going to be shattered. Everybody thinks that way, but in reality, as we were able to adjust, first of all, accept it because we're in denial. As we accepted it, we notice it's at the end of the day, it's something that it's you can manage it, right? As long as you're present, as long as you're really deep diving into that topic itself, learning, being curious. For me, actually, for us, it's been a blessing.
I love that because I think people don't realize that there's so much stigma with the idea of autism that parents, like you said, we had to learn to accept it. You know what I mean? That's the biggest thing because the child that has it or that gets diagnosed with it, I mean, they're just operating as is. You know what I mean? They don't know the stigmas that come along with this title that parents know. So I guess my it leads to my next question as a parent, how did you really manage that with your wife and with your family surrounding this diagnosis on your son?
Yeah. So at first, like I mentioned, we knew he had symptoms that needed to be addressed. We obviously at that point I was in a job that required me to travel a lot. I didn't want to face the reality, so that's where the denial kicked in. But also from a family standpoint, it was kind of hard because when you have family next to you that loves you, that has the best intent, but at the same time, they're telling you, hey, don't worry, you were the same. This is temporary, right? It's
Yeah.
dangerous. That's dangerous because imagine being in denial plus having advice from people that love you saying that don't do anything. That's dangerous because it can procrastinate any early intervention, right? So it doesn't mean because somebody that has the best intention knows what they're talking about, right? That's why I think it's so important to seek out professionals. And that's what we did. We ended up doing that because we knew it came to a point that hitting your head against the wall, tiptoeing, aligning, nonverbal, and in some months, other months talking, other months, I wasn't like that, right? So it came to a point that we knew we needed to get it addressed and obviously got diagnosed. And that's where, from a father standpoint and a mother, because my wife's a champ, that we needed to go from denial to acceptance. Now, this is the new reality. What should we do now? What type of corrections do we need to do with our own environment? The circle gets smaller. But yeah, that's more or less what the way
No,
we handle it.
no, I love that because it makes it real. You know what I mean? It makes it real because as parents, we are in denial. We think that we're going to have a healthy, beautiful, amazing child that's going to become the president one day or become or we're going to save the world and cure cancer or do something amazing that will make a difference. You know, we have so many hopes and desires for our children, but then when we find out this, it's kind of hard to react to accept, you know. So it's a hard pill to accept, but I think once we move from denial to acceptance, like you were just talking about, I think it allows us to refocus on the children and what they are and what they're doing. So
Yeah.
from your perspective, how do you handle the ups and downs of an autistic child and how do you manage that?
Well, I think that transitioning and going back a little bit to the last question, the denial, when you're now in the acceptance phase, a weight gets off of you. But I think also something that helped me a lot was I believe at that stage, now I do, that the amount, the longer you're in denial, the deeper you're in denial is the reflection of how selfish you are. Because you're only thinking about yourself. You're only thinking about, oh, what I thought, what I feel, what I think that people are going to, and only start, but you're not thinking about the child. And the denial is how selfish you are. You could be in denial like you're human, I'm human, and I'm coming here today after 6 years of ups and downs. So it's really, it sounds easy, but we've been through our own ups and downs. But what I can say is that that acceptance phase also helped me understand that denial phase I went through was really a really selfish phase I had, ego,
Yeah.
and a lot of stuff that obviously, but that's the way, that's how it is, right? When you get the acceptance, now you start accepting the new reality, but also your old version that you were saying, okay, I was only thinking about myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. Now the way we've been able to manage that is obviously by being now in this new acceptance phase. That means for us being adaptable, being
Mm.
flexible, understand that our upbringing doesn't mean that it has to be the same thing for him. I
Mm.
was raised in Puerto Rico, and
Mm.
obviously everybody's family. I met all the neighbors playing baseball in the streets. Here in the States, it's not the same. You can be a couple
Mm.
of years and you know the neighbor, but we that was our upbringing. My wife's from Cuba. But now our upbringing now doesn't mean that we need to, transfer that same, I would say, experience to him. So what we try to do is one, this new phase, I would say, helped us understand to identify what he was trying to say with his behavior.
Mm.
Because he would say something, but his behavior would say another thing, for example. That's something
Mhm.
for us very important. We also now understand that those we cannot be so hard on ourselves. It's very hard to be a functioning parent while being exhausted. So just understand that, if you're having anxiety, if you're having uncertainty, you're in the right place. Those are the thoughts that should cross over if you really are in this type of situation. But we just learn not to be so hard on ourselves and just go with the flow, but just being present, being responsible.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I'm glad you went back to the denial stage and went more deeper into that and also into the acceptance stage because I don't think many of us acknowledge the fact that we have our selfish moments as parents. You know what I mean? Because we have this peer pressure from society and from our family and from, like you said, our own upbringing that we are supposed to just implement on our children because it's tradition or it's what's always been done and it's acceptable or we don't want to lose our roots if we don't have that same experience. But in reality, having this type of children in our lives reminds us that it's okay to
Yeah.
be different. It's okay to go the unorthodox way, to step out of tradition, to do things your way that fits your family. And
Yeah.
I don't think that's talked about enough. And I'm glad that you did talk about that. And I'm also very glad that you talked about having compassion on ourselves as parents because we really don't talk about that either. We don't acknowledge the fact that we're learning as we go, we're adapting as we go. And as long as we are focusing on that, on our child's wellness, then we allow ourselves to be everything that our child actually needs versus what we think we need to be for our child. You know what I mean? And we flip the script in a
Brilliant.
manner that empowers the family dynamic in your home because it doesn't matter what anybody outside of our home sees the family. It
Mhm.
matters about what's happening inside your home and if your child is safe to be expressive in any way form that they feel necessary to express themselves. So I think that's a very valid point. And I know that you have a child with autism, but then you also have a child that's not with autism. So how do
Mhm.
you balance the two? Because I know there's many families out there like mine who have one that's an autistic child and one that's not, and you don't want to focus just one on the autistic child and ignore the other. So how do you balance managing your two different
Yeah.
brain systems of your children?
Yeah, I would say so. It's there's no perfect formula. You know, um, For us, it's just trying to see if we're going to do an activity, always try to include Amanda, which is our 3-year-old. Even though she's too young, uh, she also has her own challenges now of speech. We believe, again, nobody has mentioned this, but we believe that this speech delay comes by not being able to practice her speech with her brother because Christian, just started talking I would say a year and a half ago, and he's still not conversational. So you can ask him, "Hey, how are you?" He's going to say Kung Fu Panda. He's not going to have a conversation. But we believe that one of the factors why Amanda has this delay is because of that, right? But we just try to include her in everything. We when we make a decision, we always try to include her. If we're asking for Christian, hey, are you hungry? Do you want to eat? And even though Amanda already said yes, we then go back and say, how about you? Did you change your mind, or you just to validate that both opinions are there, that she feels included, and vice versa, because Christian in some cases also needs a extra attention. So we want to make sure that, everything's balanced in the house. I do have an ebook around that, but it's, I've seen in many cases when I speak to families that a lot of brothers, sisters who were neurotypical that are not diagnosed usually don't want to, in some cases, it has a lot of difficulty wanting to be a guardian later on if they need to, because they're
Mm,
kind of traumatized because of the upbringing. They have a lot of mixed emotions of being jealous at the same time being happy, feeling guilt at the same time. So there's a lot of things that happen there, and so we're trying as much as possible to be able to just be balance everything out here at home.
Yeah, I think having that open communication and just allowing her when she gets older to be able to express herself
Yeah.
freely is the best thing to just do, because when you have that one child that needs a little bit more attention, it does take away from the other children, and the other children do feel some type of way. But the fact that you allow that open communication in your home, and that's already a practice now at such a young age, and I'm pretty sure that's going to help her grow up to be a well-minded individual where when she's around her brother, it's not going to bother her. And because she's going to be around other people who are like him, that's going to be familiar. You know what I mean? We don't know. But at the end of the day, one thing that I have noticed is that children, siblings who do have an autistic sibling in their family home or in their relatives and things like that, they do come also out with a appreciation and understanding how to manage uh, um people with autism, and they have a little bit more compassion, and they already have this keenness, like, oh, they're not having an outbreak or an outburst because of no reason. It's because of
Mhm.
something specific, a very tiny
Yeah.
detail that only can be seen from somebody who's already seen somebody in
Yeah.
that predicament. So it's like, my next question is, how do you necessarily improve an autistic outbreak? You know what I mean? Those tantrums, those
The meltdown.
those meltdowns. Like, how do you necessarily handle that?
That's a good question. For us, we try to do things to avoid it. Like, for example, before Christian, we were years without going out to restaurants or
Mm,
anything because, he couldn't hear the blower, the public bathroom, the one you dry your hands, or it was tough. So, well, we stopped from going out from some time, but here at home, there's ways that's where I say try to be so present that you can at least try to see based on their behavior if you can understand what they're trying to say. So when we see meltdowns, or we're noticing some type of, the way he looks, or the way he's breathing, or the way that we know that a meltdown's coming, try
yeah.
to trigger other, I would say, other actions to be able to help him think out, get his mind away of what he's thinking right now. So, for
Yeah,
example,
de-escalate it. Yeah.
yes, so for example, if I see that something happened, that his sister took away one of his puppets, the one that he really always has it on him, and I see that his sister takes it and he starts breathing, and he just stays still. I just start flicking the lights so he can just see the lights, and then go see a movie. And until then, I talk to Amanda that she needs to ask for permission and all that. But we try to, again, based on what we know about him, try to do something to de-escalate it as soon as possible because we don't want him to be in that episode, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've realized is that calms my son down when he has his emotional meltdowns that we're just like, oh my God, is water is his calming point.
Awesome.
So like touching water and just seeing water is what really helps him. So we got him a fish tank with some beta fish in it, just because it's simple, you know what I mean? And ever since then, like we removed the TV from our room because we have their cribs in our room still because they're still young. But we removed the TV and replaced it with a fish tank. And every night before bed, he grabs a book. I can't read it to him because he gets upset, but he just wants me to just flip the pages with him. So I flip
Mhm.
the pages with him. We look at the fish tank and he just drifts off into sleep, happy as a little lamb. And it has changed his mood and his morning routine. Like it has really evolved. So I think de-escalation is a great tool when we see those meltdowns because they really do change them because they forget about it. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? They let it go and or sometimes just readjusting them the way that you said is another great way. And it's something that parents, I think, comes back down to, like you said, having compassion. Because when we were children, we would fight with our siblings. We would know how that feel. So imagine with an autistic child, it's even more serious in his mind because he doesn't understand the severity like we would as a normal human being. So it's just like we have to have that compassion and that understanding and put ourselves in the shoes of our children. You know what I mean? And remember how that is, right?
100%. Yeah, I know that, Christian is high functioning. And what I can say is that also, there's a lot. I was going back to when you mentioned, hey, when you first knew about it, now I can see that a lot of the things he does, I did it before. And I've talked to a lot of families, when you see that there's somebody that procrastinates something, or you see that there's somebody that starts a lot of projects and doesn't finish them.
Yeah.
And as an adult, when you go to your child and you see that there's symptoms that you would say, oh my God, but I also procrastinate. I also don't focus in some cases. I also go for one thing to the supermarket and end up bringing a lot of other. So you also see that, for example, in my case, that I've seen a lot of stuff that Christian does, and I do it as an adult as well,
Yeah.
and so it makes me think, right? Even though I was never, but 40 years ago was very different as today. But what I can say is that there's a lot of things that he does that makes me think about my own, if something were to happen to me because he does the same, right?
Absolutely. I agree. I agree with you 100%. And I'm glad you brought that up because that is something that me and my sister talks about all the time, where I think that we are autistic, but in a high functioning way as well on the spectrum, because some of the things that he does and some of the things that the therapist and the specialists they say, like, oh yeah, that's just autism, no big deal. And I was just like, oh well, that was something that I did. And I used to get in
Correct.
trouble all the time for it. You know what I mean? Or that used to bother my mom or my dad. That used to irk them. But
Mhm.
that was something that was just natural. That's something that I did. You know what I mean? That calmed me down, or just that was my little point. So yeah, I think that's something that we don't realize is that back then, like it was such a taboo to diagnose your kid with anything. I mean, come on, you're Puerto Rican, you know what I mean? I'm Puerto Rican too. The thought of diagnosing your child in a Puerto Rican, a Hispanic household is just like, oh no, then you're saying I'm a bad mother, I'm a bad this. Like, oh,
No.
that's even a worse headache to even bring in. But it's like now we're living in a day and age where we're learning how to not take it to heart in a
Mhm.
negative side of the spectrum. You know what I mean? We're trying to be more positive and optimistic because we are realizing that our health, our mental health, and our heart health has such a big impact on our children. So it's
Yeah.
like now we're moving in a way of love, in a way of acceptance and gratitude. And when we see our children now, we realize like, wow, you have your ways, but it's okay because I still love you for all that you are, and I wish somebody said that to me when I was a child. I wouldn't have all this struggled with trying to accept myself and love myself for who I am. And then
Mhm.
until I was old enough to realize like I'm fine, you know what I mean? I'm no, there's no problem with me. There was problem with the world.
Exactly.
So I think that's another great point. So when you were like learning this and you took the steps to accept it, what really is the first step that you took with your son?
Um, with my son, I would say we've always taken responsible steps in the sense that if he needed to be treated, he did. He first started with speech. We couldn't take advantage of it because out of a 45-minute session, half of it was a tantrum, 5 minutes calming him down. So the last 10 minutes in reality. So we've always, taken the necessary steps, regardless how we felt, right?
Mm.
But I think that what steps that we tried to enhance were, for example, taking away the tablet, that we would give him a lot of tablet time. Or each time that we would go on a road trip, he would have the tablet from Miami to Orlando. It became to a point that then that's the only thing he wanted to do. So one thing that we did was, okay, let's see if we can do. I was raised playing baseball. I a lot of in with the neighbors. So I said, let's see if we can do some sort of activity so he can just stay away from the tablet. So we first started in soccer.
Okay.
It wasn't good for us because he had elopement, which is just running away and no consequence. So imagine that in an open field. It's dangerous. Yeah, so it happened a lot. So then swimming. Swimming didn't work because he found it as a play date. He didn't follow instructions. He just wanted to do cannonballs and that's it.
Okay.
But then we found jujitsu. And jujitsu obviously for us has been good because before he wasn't sociable. Now he's part of the team. Before he didn't follow instructions or discipline. Now he does. He's tried to mentor other children. He cannot elope. There's four walls. So it's pure exercise every day. So it plus we walk. So it comes to a point that that's one thing that we did that we know that the results were almost immediate. Take him away from the tablets or at least reduce the tablet time and just put him in some type of sports. It
Mhm.
came to a point that for us, we also had issues within jiu-jitsu because he couldn't be initially he had to do one-on-one. He
Okay.
couldn't be in a group because it was all over the place. And then he transitioned into a group setting. But we were there. We would try to figure out. We didn't quit on him. We knew that that's he needed to do. And today he's calmer. He can sleep 8 hours before he couldn't sleep. It's different. It's different. So that's something
Yeah.
that we can say that wasn't the first step, but it's something that, we still deal with and we believe in outdoor activity and activity itself over any type of tablet time or TV.
No, I love that response because it allows our listeners to really reflect like what's causing these tantrums, what's causing this mayhem, what's causing it, what is their focus? You know what I mean? What is taking all of their focus? Because we want our children to be diverse no matter what diagnosis is on our children that are on our children because a well-minded adult is what we all want our children to be, just well-minded. You know what I mean? To be able to think for themselves, to have that conscientious awareness, you know what I mean? To think from right to wrong. And I
Right.
think just having that already as a parent, just seeing that and just knowing that's one thing that's your goal, that's a great first step because you knew, okay, that this is what I want. But how do I get there?
Yeah.
Okay, this is what this is our obstacle. Now we got to remove this, and now we got to try this, and now we got to try this, and then work from there. And I love how you also said you started off one-on-one first, and then worked your way into a group setting, because it just shows that there is room for improvements. You know what I mean? There is room to just see the growth of your child just evolve, and you don't have to have this stigma like, oh, my child is always going to be in this box, and he's
Mhm.
never going to do anything. He's never going to achieve anything. How some people say that, oh, autistic children will never amount to anything, when that's a lie. When there's
Mhm.
so many autistic individuals out there that are functioning adults because they've had somebody who pushed them or believed in them, who allowed them to be as normal as they can be in their limits of their diameter. You know what I mean? So I think that is something as parents that we can hold value to, is that
Mhm.
if we take that into consideration, it can do wonders to not only our lives, but to our children's well being. That if we die today, we know that our child is going to be well minded and be able to fend for themselves or do for themselves in whatever way form because we laid that foundation. And I think that is something that we can all take into into consideration. And it sucks because I feel like we could keep diving into so many little
Yeah.
pockets into this topic, but time is catching up to us. So what can be some lasting words of wisdom that you can leave us off with to keep on thinking?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago I went through like a coaching session, and there was this coach that said something to me that this quote I would say changed a lot in my mindset, which is it's not your fault, but it's your problem. But when we turn it to our side, it's more on it's not our fault, but it's our responsibility. And it's not our fault that Christian has what smile and functional, but he still has it. But it's our responsibility to develop his strength, those weaknesses that he does have, also tackle it at its time, and just be responsible. That's something I see a lot of cases that you see a lot of parents that divorce rates are very high in special needs families.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the divorce rate just in neurotypical families is like 50%. With special needs, it goes up to like 80. Because this makes you or breaks the marriage, right? Because there's so much therapy. One may need to leave the job, the other one needs to work even more. But there's a lot of things, that this, I would say it's an opportunity for any marriage to just sit down, reflect. I've seen parents that know more their sales quota than their son's progress. And I believe that this is a moment that every family should just sit down and see what's important, what's not, how they can track progress, and put a plan in place. Not everything needs to be committed now, but put a plan in place that that's going to be for the whole family. And when I say a plan is okay, do you want your son to be homeschooled? Do you want him to be in a private school? Do you want him to be in public in a special needs class? Do you want somebody to stay at home and the other one works? If the other one works, what does that person need to do to acquire a skill to increase their income? Or they want to build a business. Like, put a plan. How do you want that family to be like in the next 5 years? Because at the end of the day, you're designing your family household however you want. So I would say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I love that because we are designing our family the way that we see fit, that what's comfortable for us. I
Yeah.
mean, one thing that I've always said, and because I was always told this as a growing up, is that your family is what is who lives in your house.
Hmm.
That's your family. Everyone outside of your house is your relatives. They may have the same blood, they may have the same DNA, but at the end of the day, they're not in your home. And who's in your home affects your life, affects your well-being, affects your direction and where you're going. So it's like when we establish a good foundation in our home for our family, for our children to be the best that they can be, then that removes any guilt that, oh, we didn't do enough, or that shame that, oh, I should have done this instead. Like, no, come back to your family. Stop worrying about everybody else. Worry about who's in your home, because who's in your home is what matters. They
Yeah.
depend on you in a whole different way, especially these children who have autism. They don't know anybody else but you. So it's like you have to be that person. And the fact that you were like, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. Oh, come on, ladies and gentlemen. We really have to take that into consideration. It's our responsibility as an adult to remove these naysayers, to remove these negative thoughts in our mind, and to embrace what's in front of us. And I think that takes time, but I think when you put in compassion, like you were talking about earlier in the show, when we put that compassion back in, we will allow ourselves to grow with our kids. And there's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with growing with our kids. I think it's just the stigma that you're supposed to have it all together and know it all once you have kids. It's like, no, it's a
Yeah.
lie. It's a lie. It's a lie. Don't believe into the lie, because the truth is we're all just trying to figure it out as we go. And I
Yeah.
think if we remember that, then it will go a long way. Oh my goodness, we could keep talking. Goodness, Michael, I'm gonna have to make an excuse to bring you back onto the show because this is has been such a great time. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys want to know more about Michael and his foundation to help other people in the autism community have great resources to know that you're not alone, please go check him out. I have his lovely photo along with his websites and all of the great links so that we can continue on thinking. Because isn't that the point? To continue on thinking. So, with that being said, bye.